Thanks for being here, man.
My
Appreciate
pleasure,
it.
man. Thanks for having me.
Associate head strength and conditioning coach for Los Angeles Lakers.
Yep.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Nice.
How long have you been in the league right now?
Started in 2005 with the Seattle Supersonics, so that kind of dates me a little bit. But
Like 15, 14
yeah,
years?
14. This is my 14th in the NBA. I had a little gap here and there where I coached for China for a little bit. But
Long time.
Yeah, long time.
So Sonics, and you were in Atlanta.
Correct.
Memphis and Lakers.
Now here, yep.
Nice. That's cool.
How many years total?
14.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's as long as I've been a strength coach, actually more. I've been a strength coach for like 12 now.
No, this is cool because I mean, when I first started, I mean, you're probably not gonna remember, but as the assistant, we went to Chicago for a conference.
Yeah.
I mean, you were the most approachable guy that I was like, man, this it was cool.
Yeah, cool.
You know, because I mean, our association is great now, but like before, like trying to figure out, which was 9 years ago.
Yeah. I don't even know, was the association still there at that time? Because it was there, and then it kind of fell apart, and then it started back up again.
I think it was started back up,
Yeah.
but I think it was like the second year or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think I sat with like the same table as you, and it was cool.
Cool, man.
So yeah, it was interesting.
Always try to welcome the new people in, make them feel comfortable, stuff like that. I think we have a good group of strength coaches in the NBA that are genuinely good people a lot of the time. So to kind of carry on with that tradition, that's kind of what I got in. I met some really cool guys early on. Dwight Dobb was one of my mentors and kind of showed me the ropes and you know, kind of takes that to get into the field and get comfortable with stuff. So anytime I can do that, it's kind of an honor to be able to do that with people, having experienced that myself. So
That's cool. And then Shapiro said he went to high school with
Yeah.
you too, right?
same high school, two strength coaches in the NBA that went to high school together at the same time. So that's
cool.
That's another
How
unique
crazy
one.
is that? Like, you guys are literally sharing classes.
We actually lived probably 3 blocks away from each
No
other.
way.
Too.
Wow.
We were talking about it a little
That's
while ago.
awesome.
Yeah.
But you never you spoke to each other before at all?
A little. He was 2 years older than me, so I was a sophomore when he was a senior. So we weren't like in the same space all the time, but I definitely knew who he was. His younger brother's 1 year younger than me, and we played football together. So I always knew Daniel. We weren't close. We became a lot closer once we were professional strength coaches and stuff. So we had a lot of the same mentors.
Was it more like, oh, hey, you? What?
Yeah, a lot of that for sure. And just I'm like, you're doing this too, and you're here. Okay, let's run with this. Yeah, so it's been cool to kind of just share war stories and stuff like that over the years, and he's helped me a ton as far as he got into the field before I did, and he kind of helped me meet the right people to kind of make some of the moves that I've made. So
How important is that for career development?
unfortunately, it's a huge piece of it. I wish we could all just kind of stand on the quality of our work and stuff like that. But if you don't know the right people, I mean, that's a huge piece of it. Your network is really going to determine your where you go in the field. So I don't like to over network or overvalue my network. I'd like to earn my network, earn the respect of the people that I value in the field. But it is a piece of it. So like to disregard that would be a mistake, I think. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How was it a little bit from the beginning as Chattin wanting to be a strength coach to then finally Chattin becoming a strength coach?
Yeah. I mean, early on, you're kind of, you look at the field and there's so much information, and even now, the ability to access information with the internet and stuff like that. The internet wasn't nearly as good of a resource as it is now when I started, but just kind of sifting through and seeing different philosophies, different training techniques, stuff like that is a little bit overwhelming at first, but after being in it as long as I have, trial and error has been one of my best teachers. Just experience, and just trying different things, see what works, see what guys respond to, and see physiologically what guys, are these things that we're doing actually improving them and their ability to perform. So, that is probably what's changed the most is just experience, and my philosophy hasn't changed. I value progressively overloading and getting stronger, you know what I mean? That's where your durability is going to come in. You're going to have stronger bones, you're going to have stronger connective tissue, and there's certainly a place for corrective exercise or functional exercise, but to me the basis and the foundation of what we do is getting stronger and different movements that you value for your sport. So
that's very interesting because I remember you were the first weight room that I've seen with punching bag.
Oh yeah.
And you're passionate about martial arts and boxing and things like that. How do you use that kind of like more functional side training the guys if you do train the guys that way?
Sure. And I don't spend, that's kind of a alternative conditioning strategy for me. In all honesty, that ended up being just my personal punching bag more than it was for the players. I was so into boxing at the time. I figured, off season we get a ton of value out of that. We'd bring different coaches in to train with them, but we didn't use it as much as I thought we would. But some guys who have boxed, and I've met some NBA players who are really good, like had great hands and had a good background, like maybe amateur backgrounds, fought Golden Gloves and stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun doing that stuff. But it's not necessarily a huge piece of what I do. But the functional side of things, I mean, certainly we want to load, but not everybody's ready for that. And not everybody's in a space timing-wise where that's maybe the most appropriate thing to do. Certainly there's always forms of a squat, there's forms of a hinge, there's forms of a push and a pull that you should do or could do that are progressions or regressions. There's always a way to put it in there, but I think, kicking on stabilizing muscles that help protect the joint, things like that, I think there's a ton of value there too. So especially before competition or preparing for games, kind of getting guys ready in that way, I think is pretty useful. Where you're not overloading them and putting them in a state where they're fatigued and not able to perform the way they want to do. Yeah, exactly. Just kind of good way to get the body kicked on. So for me, that's kind of probably my biggest application of functional training. I mean, what's not functional? What is functional? That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But
we'll be here all weekend.
Exactly. But I think pre-game, kind of prior to actually performing, I think is a great way to do some lower threshold functional type of training. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah. What got you into martial arts in the first place? Because I know you like jiu-jitsu. I know you've done a lot of boxing. How was that? Like, where did it came into your life, and like when did you decide, like, you know what, I'm gonna go roll or punch?
It's a great question. So I was a football player in high school and college. That was kind of I did some other things, but those were kind of that was my main sport. And so training for football is kind of survival in a lot of ways. And so I really learned to love and value that process. And so I almost loved training more than I loved playing football. So that kind of set me off on and then when I got to college, I saw that obviously. We had strength coaches, and I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. As I'm studying, I forgot what my first major was, but as I was studying for philosophy or whatever it was, it kind of dawned on me that like I could be a strength coach and maybe I should switch gears here. So I started to kind of pick their brains a little bit and how to actually get into the field. I ended up getting a BS in exercise science, kind of knowing that's the direction that I wanted to go.
Okay.
And that kind of set the whole thing in motion. And after college, training was obviously a huge. If you want to be a strength coach, if you don't train, that's a problematic thing. So really continued to value training, and then I had kind of built myself up to the point where I felt like I was pretty strong and I'm in pretty good shape, and that was cool. But now like I have a better machine that I'm working with. How can I apply this? And so always was really interested in, from the first UFC on, just like, that's fascinating. Not just the machismo aspect of beating somebody up, but like, that's how we defend ourselves as a species. It's almost bigger than that. It's really fascinating. And then at the higher levels, it's a human chess match, especially with jiu-jitsu and things like that. But even boxing, there's so much thought process.
Yeah.
And then, so it was a great way for me to kind of apply my physical machine that I had kind of created, and it's unbelievable exercise, and it certainly beat running for miles or riding on a bike, anything like that. So it was really interesting, and then I had a useful skill. Hopefully I'll never have to get in a fight again in my life, but if I did, at least I'd have some idea what to do. So exactly. So that's kind of how I got into that. Yeah,
that's awesome. Because I bet what you've learned in martial arts probably transfers to somehow in coaching, though.
I think so, especially. Well, one thing that I got from boxing, if you're really tight and just trying to power your punches all the time in boxing, you're going to get gassed so quickly. Learning to relax and actually being faster and more efficient and productive when you relax, that clicked on a light bulb in my head to where like guys need to really learn how to be efficient with their energy. Now they're unbelievable athletes to begin with, but I think kind of applying some of those principles into your training, things like that, could be really useful. And then with jiu-jitsu, there's so many lessons to learn from that. Yeah, it's a whole discipline of thought process. I mean, I've met some brilliant jiu-jitsu practitioners. I'm a white belt, so by no means am I
Yeah.
far along, but it's a fascinating sport and something I'll probably continue to do whether I move up in belts or not. It's just something kind of cool to keep in touch with.
Yeah.
And very different on the martial arts perspective from boxing. I mean, being on your back or wherever you find yourself, it's such a unique sport and so different from boxing. But they're both super useful, in that field. So,
dude, I love it. He said something that we were talking about the other day. Felipe brought that up, right? About like being a more efficient athlete.
Yeah.
And like from an energy system standpoint,
Sure.
and then like how, and it was funny because you said it, and I kind of I didn't put too much value into right away. But then like as I'm riding the elevator, I'm like, dude, that's crazy. And now you just said it, and it's like, it's true, because the more energy you want to put out, it's more taxing on the body.
for sure.
So like, you can chime in whenever, but like we're talking about martial arts and being stiff and trying to punch as hard as you can, when really you're looking for some sort of efficiency and smoothness. Fluidity.
No question.
But and then like you see, now we're talking about how to coach athletes.
Yeah.
And you see them muscling stuff, and
Sure.
it's crazy how a simple, like you just learning a different martial art is like kind of shaping a philosophy of a coach.
Absolutely. And I think, there's so many things that you can do in your life that can improve you as a coach, and if you're kind of one-dimensional, you're just thinking about bars and weights and how, rate of force development, all these things are super valuable to what we do, but I think there's value them as human beings and understand that there's different learning patterns for people too. Everybody's, different types of learners out there. And if you can kind of connect with them on something, because you have a broader bucket or tool belt to pull from, I think, all that stuff's really useful.
Yeah. Crazy.
Mainly because, in the NBA, players are so skilled.
Yes.
And, like they grew up like playing basketball and not in the weight room. Not a lot of players understand why to lift weights. So I feel like the energy explanation, like there's different ways to approach everybody.
Sure, for sure.
But like the explanation of like, hey, how to be more efficient with your energy.
Right.
I find players are very receptive to that.
For sure.
And I'd be like, hey, I want you playing the same energy you had in the first quarter, in the fourth quarter,
right,
overtime. And they're
don't be wasteful.
Yes. Don't just waste.
To the point that you're making right now too is like, and that's something that's changed. That kind of made me go back to another question you guys asked, but like what's kind of changed over the years, and that's a big piece of it too. I think people value the weight room from 2005 to now. This has become much more ingrained in the culture of our sport, where before it was kind of like, I don't want to go in the weight room and get sore and squat. I don't want to put a bar on my back, that's and there's so many different ways to squat. And I think early on, strength coaches a lot of times kind of came from the genesis of our field, which was like college football essentially. And if you train a basketball player like that, that's not going to work for a lot of guys. They just don't have the prerequisite structural strength. Their tissues are not prepared to do that. And if you put if you squat a guy or deadlift somebody or whatever you're doing, and they're not prepared to do it, they're going to turn off from what you're doing. So I think there was a shift that was more to like corrective exercise when the NASM and things like that got involved, and that was a good step in the right direction. But then we needed to kind of circle back and be like, loading is still really useful though. It just depends on how you do it. So I think we've gotten to a point, there's been an evolution in the field to where now we're kind of merging the two worlds and figuring out to meet a guy where he's at, but not, don't take your eye off the ball of progressive overload and actually getting stronger too. So that's been kind of a fascinating arc to see in our field.
It's very interesting you say that because I'm from Brazil, so I'm a big soccer fan.
Sure.
So I follow the Bayern Munich. Like they're winning everything.
Right.
So they just posted like their main 5 or 6 main players the before and after. And they just got so much bigger when they went to Bayern. They're like, what are you feeding you guys? And the strength coach just came and was like, guys, it's called weight training.
Right. The basics. The basics.
Yeah.
It gets said over and over and over again, but man, the basics can take you where you want to go. Complexity for the sake of complexity or for just novel stimulus. There's a time and a place, I guess, for that, but if you can change levels by squatting or hinging, if you can, do a push, a pull, and then unilateral variations of all those things and train your core, that's really, I don't know how much more complicated than that it needs to be. I mean, there's always going to be, ways to evolve and improve what you do as a coach, but the basics still remain. I mean, that hasn't changed too much since the beginning. So, yeah.
And, going back to when you first started now, like how much do you think players get better by practice itself and then everything else they do?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because I mean, when if, like practice is practice, right? I mean, the players are going to get better, but like seems like practice are not being less and less, they're just being more efficient.
Yeah.
Because now it's all about that load and how many minutes they play this and GPS data.
You're right.
Those things are very important and helps, but at the same time, I feel like all the extra work around before and after practice are making the players better
100%
and prepared to play the game versus just like, let's go and practice for 3 hours.
Right. And that was something early on. Practices were much longer. And so guys were gassed by the end, so they're playing very slowly because they're tired, right? And the coach thinks, these guys aren't in good shape, let's practice more. And so there's a saying that fatigue masks fitness. When someone's tired, you can't really tell how fit they are because they're not actually showing you because they're gassed. And so that could be kind of counterintuitive to what you're seeing as a coach. And then you learn to play slowly, which is not what we want. So like having a shorter, intense practice, you're going to be able to be faster for, you're going to learn to play fast. So hopefully that carries over in the game where your timing is much better. And then one thing that kind of, and I've had debates with many coaches about this, and they don't back off from their point, but I don't typically either. But I think we just shoot. They just shoot with nobody out there all the time. And certainly muscle memory, you want to lock in that motor pattern. And the great shooters typically shoot a lot. I get it. But it seems like there's so much time spent shooting against nobody. I don't know what that's getting you. It's not going to be the same timing. It's not going to be the same, a defender coming at you with the hand up. It's a totally different thing. So I think
pressure situation.
Exactly. There's to kind of spend so much time on that. I think it's something that we should kind of continue to revisit as a sport. Is meaningless repetitions. Not that they're meaningless. I get it. Great shooters need to shoot a lot, but I think just to kind of try to really take an intelligent approach and not doing any more than you have to is something to think about, because you're repeating the same pattern over and over and over again. The body only it's finite, you know what I mean? We're not indestructible. If you do the same pattern over and over and over and over again,
something chronic can pop.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But it's crazy because like you can break all that into levels.
Yes.
Of like foundational movement, which will be the skill or the adoption of the early skill from a movement standpoint. Mechanics, whatever, and then you start ingraining and building the blocks to the point where like, hey, why do I need the skill for? And then practice in that situation.
Absolutely.
Actually, what was it with John? We were talking about quality minutes.
Yeah.
And then what does that really mean?
Right.
And then now we're talking about like, do you think there's a difference of regular season minutes to playoff minutes?
Yeah. For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
We're all seeing this. And then now you like even like further, like you think there's a difference between time for starters in the regular season and time for starters in playoff.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're gonna play your best guys as long as you can. Because you want to winning. Exactly. If you lose a regular season game, it's obviously not good, but it's not the end. If you lose a playoff game, it's over. So you have to do you have to put your best product on the floor. So 100%, and they're playing as hard as they possibly can because it's the highest level of our competition. I would even argue that there's a difference from round to round. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah. So, I totally agree with you.
And what's the difference of sparring,
right? Exactly.
And then actually going to a scheduled fight or match,
right?
Where you have no idea you have an idea who the guy is, but like he doesn't care about you.
Right, exactly.
Or drilling jiu-jitsu was like, here, I'm gonna let you do the technique on me and I'm gonna tap real quick. Or like you go to a tournament and you try to do the same
guy
technique.
won't tap to anything. So. And even hitting a heavy bag to sparring, that alone, that's another thing. There's like, hitting a heavy bag's cool, but there's nothing, you don't have to defend yourself, you don't have to put your hands up really if you don't want to. So to that point, it's like, is the specificity of what you're doing actually going to carry over into the competition part of it?
That's fascinating to me. Because it's really like, we talk about developing athletes.
Right.
And I think that conversation is very valid. We're not talking about how many sets of squats you need to do.
Right.
From a physiological standpoint, we could.
Right.
But it's also like, what are we trying to transfer onto the court?
Yeah, for sure. And like, being meathead at heart. I used to really value bench press, and I thought that was a cool movement. But then it kind of dawned on me years ago, like certainly, well, there's time and a place for doing that. I don't bench press much. I'd probably floor press a guy now just for safety. But there's a lot of good stuff you can gain from that hormonally. But like, how often is a guy laying on a plank in a game and pressing something off of his chest? So it's like it's important to kind of really think specifically like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and not just kind of go through the motions. So I think as a field, if we can continue to kind of evolve and refine what we do, it's only going to help improve everybody.
That's amazing. How do you, because you brought a great point, it's like you actually like thinking about stuff, and you said the word like as a field, and like, because you mentioned to me earlier, like you have your little routine in the morning, like every day you read for an hour in the morning, that's your first thing. What got you to start rethinking training?
That's a great question. I think maybe early on I wasn't getting the results that I was expecting or wanting from a lot of the training that I was doing. And
for yourself or for
No,
athletes?
for when I was training guys.
Okay.
And it was for a variety of reasons. It's always, multi-layered, multifactorial why those things happen. But I think just going to the drawing board and kind of, when I learned maybe 4 or 5 years in to doing this, like I've got to audit myself and figure out, like, I have to be able to look in the mirror and be honest with myself that like maybe something that I believed in before isn't working in the way that I thought it was, and you got to be willing to change. And so if you don't attach your ego to the process, you can grow so much faster. You know, if you're like, this is what I believe, this is, and that's almost everything in every philosophy of this that you believe. If you're not willing to kind of audit yourself and figure out, is this working or not working, I think it's going to slow down your progress. So when I believe in something, I'll stick with it until I'm proven otherwise. But I'm always open to shifting or making some tweaks here and there based on, is it actually getting the result that I want? Everything causes a result, right? But is it the result? Is it a good result?
What you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. I appreciate the honesty on that, because like I feel like our field, like you said, is guarded from the ego standpoint. Yeah. And it's like, I've been doing this method for so many years or whatever. Like I got so and so stronger. But the reality is, we do have to check the ego at the door, and we have to like self-audit for sure.
And it's a macho field. I mean, everybody has a certain amount of ego, and some of that can be healthy. It can drive you to levels of success. But if it's to the point where it's holding you back from being honest with yourself, then that can be tough.
Yeah, that's cool. Any episodes that you can share from your own, like maybe something happened and you're like, hey, you went home and you're like, yes, I need to change that.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, there's been plenty. I think so. I was also a power lifter in high school, and I could deadlift a lot of weight, but I don't think my form was very good. But I always valued deadlifting. I knew that developing your posterior chain and the hinge pattern was pretty important. You're going to get stronger hamstrings, glutes, even your back strength, even your upper back improves. And so I would just have guys do it, and there'd be a point where I'd push on deadlift with certain guys, and sometimes a guy's back would get tight or light up, and some guys, I had a time at which a guy had a spasm, and so I had to really examine, like, I knew deadlift was still good, but I kind of stopped doing it as much, just because the risk to reward for at the time was not there, so. It took me a while, maybe a couple years, before I started to revisit it again, and that was something that now it's a staple of my program, as it always should have been. But I just wasn't doing it with as much attention to detail as I should have, and so kind of that I had to take a step back, check my own ego, and really listen to some people who may not have even had as much experience as me, but had way better cueing and technique on deadlifting and how they taught it. So that'd be one example.
Yeah.
There's been many though.
No, but you see but you learn so much from a statement like that.
Yeah.
Personally.
Sure.
Me.
Yeah.
But I think that we have so much power in our story though.
Totally.
And experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and as much as we can share openly and honestly, I think that's, if we're just kind of all protecting our ego and sitting back here, that gets to be not very productive.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, one thing that we always ask our our guest is, I mean, there's a lot of people trying to get where we are, right? For the young strength coaches there, what do you think, what would be your message now to get into the field? Not, I mean, maybe necessarily in the basketball, but like just get into the field and be successful.
And I started off 15 years ago, and honestly at the time it was so much easier to get in than it is now. It's never been easy. You still have to show a certain amount of proficiency, a good attitude, your ability to connect with people on a variety of levels and with a variety of backgrounds. But I think, number one now would be, again, be a very good strength coach first before you assume. Like, be willing to take the time to improve your skill set, whether that's attending courses. My biggest jump forward was when I started connecting with mentors who are willing to take the time with me. So finding a mentor is critical. And then just be willing to understand that you're not going to make a ton of money right off the bat. I mean, some people get fortunate and they get into good career paths right off the bat, but typically in this field now, especially, internships and kind of being able to work for free where you're learning a ton and actually connecting with the right people to get you where you want to go, it's really important. And if you kind of try to jump ahead or take shortcuts, I think your path's going to be a lot longer than if I know this guy's been working for 3 years under a person that I respect and has been a great learner, but also shown some leadership qualities. I'd be really interested in talking to that person besides somebody who's a really good networker and goes to all the conferences and connects to the people at the very top. Like, I don't know where for me, that's just not as appealing of a person. I don't think you understand the respect that you should have for the field, because there's been a lot of people that have paid dues and kind of helped to progress it where it is now. Now I think people at the top of the field can make good money, and there's some really cool positions out there. But it took a while for basketball in general just to value what we do and how it can actually help the sport.
Let's get into, because we do have a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Let's get into like how do you refine your own edge as a coach?
Yeah.
I want to get into that little, like you talked about your routine in the mornings.
Sure.
Or like the ability that you have to read outside of coaching itself.
Yeah. I think if your head is too much in the scientific or coaching aspect of this field, you're not going to expand your own skill set and thought process enough to where you can start to actually continue to grow. That's kind of a weird answer, but that makes sense at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think you have to have broader interests that you can pull into. Maybe you can now, like as you guys know, being able to connect with other people in this, you're with your athletes is critical. It's I've met people who are brilliant, unbelievably well read, had a million options in their tool belt of different strategies to help somebody, but just weren't really good communicators, and they ended up failing
delivery.
out. Yeah, and the inverse of that too is I've met some people who are unbelievably socially skilled and connect with people and get it going, and the guys like training with them, but they just didn't really know enough about the field. But I've kind of been more on the process of the scientific aspect of training, like how do I, scientifically what's proven to work for these guys, and how can I do that? And so having a broader perspective and different ways of thinking where I can converse with the people that I'm working with about a variety of things, I think that's huge. But then maybe it gets you thinking about your training itself in a different way too. So I think just kind of broadening your perspective is really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share with us some of the stuff that you like outside of coaching. I know we're talking about martial arts. If you want to dive into that, you can.
I have a family too, and that's been an education into itself. I have a 1-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a wife of 10 years now. So
that's awesome.
Those have been some of my greatest learning experiences, and just kind of getting a better perspective of all that stuff has been great, and that kind of helped to now. If a player's having some stuff going on at home or different stresses that with their family, good or bad or whatever, it's you kind of can empathize and understand where they're coming from a little more. So that's not like it is chosen, but it's not necessarily a chosen way to broaden my perspective on coaching. But it's certainly a huge piece for me, and then. I love traveling too, and just meeting different people, seeing different parts of the world. So I think that's huge also, just kind of again, broadening your perspective and understand where people from all around the world are kind of, how the perspective can be completely different based on where they grew up. So it's, those would be a couple main things of just kind of getting a better depth of understanding of being a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you basically reading about anything that perks your interest?
Yeah, I just finished, like 4 days ago, a book called Sapiens.
Okay.
It basically is like, it's broad, it's really dense information too, but it was fascinating. Like the evolution of the human species. Mm-hmm. So that's been great, and it kind of plays into what we were talking about too. I'm reading the Book of Five Rings now. It's kind of plays in with martial arts too. I'm going to go away from this. I'm reading another book about how beneficial water and being by the beach is, and so how that can give you so many different benefits too. So I'm kind of trying to touch on a lot of stuff.
Diversify.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't read too terribly much about the same subject all the time. I like to kind of just branch out into something new. When I finish something up, I try to go after something new that's completely different just to kind of keep the thought process fresh.
That's interesting. And then you do that in a very routine way.
Here, yes. At home with family and stuff like that, not nearly as easy. Yeah, exactly. I would love to read more at home, but you got a 1-year-old or a 6-year-old climbing on you. It's not the best time.
Yeah.
So I find spots here and there on the at home, but typically on the road or in here, it's been ideal because we're not traveling, and so every day you wake up and you kind of can get in a routine. I would imagine like prison. Obviously, not comparing this to that, but there's a routineness to it that I would say probably is similar.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I'm gonna shift. How did you get your first job, and how did you get your last job?
Yeah. My first job, I was actually right after college, I had to do an internship to finish up my degree, and so I worked at University of Washington, and I latched on with the men's and women's basketball team. I started off with football, and that was cool. I kind of knew that already, though. I'd been a football player in college and kind of understood what that type of training was. And then I saw basketball. I was like, that's pretty interesting. That's a little different. There's some different qualities they're looking at, and it's not, they're not capable, their bodies are just different, just longer levers and stuff like that, and they value different things athletically. So I thought that was really interesting. So I dove down that rabbit hole and found that I really connected with those type of athletes, the men and the women, a lot easier. So I got a job with the Seattle Storm, and I was the assistant strength coach for the Sonics, so kind of was dual rolled there. And
Shapiro did that too, didn't he?
Yeah.
You guys are like,
it's unbelievable how our paths have kind of intertwined a lot, and we keep in touch. Now we just look back and laugh because we've both been doing it for so long.
I read your bio and I'm like, wait a minute, am I reading? Is this Shapiro's tab?
Right. There's a lot of similarities for sure. So we and now we're both in LA too.
LA.
So,
The Clippers and the
exactly.
Lakers. That's awesome.
So needless to say, we talk a lot of shit to each other, but we have a fun time doing it. So they said if you're the strength coach for the Storm, you're going to be the assistant strength coach for the Sonics. So I jumped at that. Great opportunity.
Who would say no to that, right?
No, not at all.
No,
they basically had the Lakers job opened up, and I ended up getting it. And it was a region of the country that I really wanted to live in. So with an organization, obviously with a pretty rich history in the sport, and it all kind of ended up working out pretty well.
I mean, from a strength and conditioning standpoint and performance, like you work for an organization like Lakers, it's like that's something to have in your resume. You're gonna look back and you know, grandchildren will be like,
pretty cool. Yeah. So at this point, being in it for I don't think I'm gonna do this specific type of job forever, and so eventually I'd like to kind of get out and apply what I do to a lot of different things, but I'm really just value the experience at this point. I'm gonna do it for as long as I can here with the Lakers, and then take it into the next phase after that. But now I just kind of take it day by day and appreciate the whole experience and kind of the path leading to this point where we're at now.
Yeah. So actually, you brought up a great point, and we talk about this a lot too. What it's like, kind of like Chattin, the strength coach. If Chattin, the strength coach, wasn't the strength coach, what would Chattin be doing? Or if you want to go even further, it's like you said, this is a career that's finite, and what will be the next step for you?
Yeah. A great question, and something I think about regularly. If I didn't do this, I feel like I'd honestly be training people in a different scenario, a different setting, because I do value just developing human physiology is fascinating to me. But besides that, I think there's I've always been really interested in like, how can I leave the world better than I found it? And so just, different social issues, helping people that are at risk or in underserved communities has always been a really big drive of mine and a passion of mine. I don't really talk about it too much or put it out there. I just kind of end up working with various organizations and people that kind of are interested in that also. And so that's not really a money-making vehicle. That's more of just kind of satisfy my own soul kind of a task that I've taken
That
on.
shows your diversity as a coach, though.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So I think if I didn't do this, I'd probably be a trainer. Who knows where?
So,
yeah. But when I'm done, I'd kind of like to dive down how could I say this without being political? But just helping other people wherever I can that are at risk. Yeah.
Because we talk about this. It's like, and this is no knocking older coaches, right? And then you start getting to your 45, 50, 55. It's like the job demands are, we're moving a lot of equipment. Like you got to have a certain energy.
The travel it takes a toll on you too. It's awesome, but it also takes a toll on you too. So there's one thing that's been good for me, Gunnar, working with him he's older than me, and he holds up really well and makes it look easy, and so that's kind of inspirational in its own way. And Dwight Dobb, who was one of my first mentors, was in his 50s when he was doing this. So I think it's doable to carry it into your later years. Probably wouldn't be my most ideal thing though. So I'd like to transition this into something really cool someday, but for right now I'm grateful to have this opportunity and enjoying it for all it's worth, and we'll do it for as long as they'll have me.
This is just personal interest. And I feel like I'm kind of like excluding Felipe because I have all these questions, but jump in, man, anytime. But like, and we share this a lot too. It's like financially, we talk about like, the field, like it pays well, we have good positions, but then there's also the other side of that. Which for a while you don't make a lot. And now we're talking about retirement. We're talking about being ready for that step. Any tips or any advice that you have or a mentor share with you of things that as a strength coach you should be looking at for that, either the rainy day, and COVID was a big hit on a lot of people.
For sure. And it's obviously
hopefully
changed.
This makes sense.
It does. It's the field is different now because obviously in-person training is tough. So with so many restrictions with public gyms and even private gyms, it's changed the field, and a lot of people are doing things virtually, stuff like that. That doesn't appeal to me nearly as much. So that being said, in this climate, I don't really have a great contingency plan. If things don't work out, I just would kind of have to figure it out. There's so many things that are changing so quickly right now. I think being nimble and pliable and finding your opportunities wherever you can is going to be, being a quick thinker, being able to someone that can network a little bit and be able to connect with the people that you value. I think hopefully that can kind of provide some opportunities. That's always how I've kind of operated. I have my network. It's not huge, but it's pretty, people that are in the right places that can kind of point me in the right direction. So I definitely would call on that. But I think these are weird times. So it's I don't know if there's a path that I could say that would apply to now, because things have changed already. So having a contingency plan in the backyard. I have a few things that I think I could fall back on that are there, but it's an uncertain time, so I don't think I have anything concrete that would be really useful for this where we're at as a.
But you mentioned though, you answered just being adaptable.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably the biggest piece. It's you have to be pliable right now. It's so many things are changing. If you have principles and you have a background of training and experience, things like that, that's certainly going to play a big role in your next step. But besides that, I think just being able to look for opportunities in the right place and be creative and be crafty when you have to, and try to talk to the right people.
It's funny, and this is a quick story. So I lived in Canada for a while, and I met a good friend of mine, and then he kind of followed a little bit of my footsteps. So when I interned in the U.S., he was like, "Hey, how about that?" So when I finished my internship, I kind of says, "Hey, you guys should look into this guy."
Yeah.
And so he ended up interning there as well. And then fast forward, he ended up becoming a full-time strength coach in Canada. Right?
Nice.
He went back to Canada and did all that. But now basically got furloughed because of the whole COVID situation. But because he has a very strong construction background.
Oh, nice.
Like
something to fall back on.
Yeah, so like he's sending me Snapchats, project of the day, and like he's moving a dock out, or like he's like, you know, like cleaning some land or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I just replied back, I'm like, I'm gonna come and intern with you.
For sure.
You know,
honestly, like just some like good honest man, like farming or, you know, that kind of stuff. It's kind of appealing. I think, you know, if the shit hits the fan and we're kind of in a weird space, that maybe and we're you know, survivalists at that point. They you know, who knows? It's construction, you know, being a carpenter or like being a farmer or being an artisan, things like that. Those will all have a space, you know, forever. So, you know, if you can find your way in you know, doing those things, I think you'll always have a vocation.
It's, to me, it's just fascinating because it's a journey of life a little bit.
For sure.
You know,
for sure.
Being able to adapt and morph
and think, you know, we're still in one of the more stable, even right now, we're still in one of the more stable times in human history. Like there's been crazy wars, crazy migrations. You know, people have had to deal with way worse stuff than we're dealing with now. We still have we're in air conditioned in Florida and sipping water and it's bottled, or, you know, I mean, it's we have pretty easy lifestyles in a lot of ways.
For sure.
But you know, you never know where things are going to go.
So that's awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. This is fun. Yeah, appreciate both you guys. I've known Felipe for a long time and always respected his work, and so appreciate you having me on.
No, appreciate you, Pim.
Actually, what was the idea? We got to make the guests speak a word in Portuguese.
Oh yeah, you probably know it.
Portuguese. Obrigado.
Obrigado.
Muito bem. Onde fica lá o restaurante?
There you go. That's good. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you guys.